quote this a lot, and I think I heard Johnny Marr saying it, but it's a Pablo Picasso quote, which is, inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. And I think there's different types. There is that where something falls out of the sky and you just get it, but sometimes you're just going in like a 9 to 5 or 10 till 6 in our case, and trying, just slogging away at something. And you just don't know why. You've got a little kernel of something good, but you just can't turn it into, you don't know what the next piece is. And
all right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you, Jon, as well. I didn't expect a full band this morning. That's super lovely. Cool. All right. So, yeah, you're in Uzbekistan at the moment. I've never been there before. What's it like? You guys have got such a popular sort of thing all around the world. Like, what is it like to have kind of blown up with what you've done?
Well, we've never been to Uzbekistan before. This is definitely a first for us. But we had the offer and it's like, well, let's go and see what it's like. And we arrived this morning, so we haven't seen a great deal yet, but it looks like a beautiful place. Everybody's very friendly. It's very warm. We're just kind of dealing with the jet lag. We've just come off the back of a European leg, the second leg of our European tour. But yeah, how does it feel? It feels great. It's amazing, to think how far we've come from, just playing little gigs in Manchester to be able to tour the world and still be doing it like 12 years on from when we first started. We're kind of, I guess we're veterans now. So yeah. But yeah, it feels great to still be doing it.
Yeah. What's the sort of audience like? I don't know if you like sit and like chat with audiences before or after the show. I mean, when I sort of Google you guys, you're described as jazz, and I think that's probably the easiest way to put it for people who don't know your music, but I wouldn't really describe it as jazz. I feel like that's completely wrong. It's almost like emotional. It's like filmic is the way I describe it. Like there's songs that you can hear, and it doesn't necessarily need to be like your style of music. There's just different songs I hear, and I sort of like, it's very easy to picture almost like a movie in your head. You get like a scene and you can imagine characters playing out, and it could just be anything random. And I feel like GoGo Penguin is very much that style of music. I'm curious, like, how did you come up with this? Because it's not like anything else that I've ever heard before. Like, where did it all begin?
Well, it's I think the kind of very beginnings of it are that we were based in Manchester and somehow just kind of got lucky and met each other, finding that we were sort of similar-minded people. We'd all had different backgrounds originally, musically, but we'd all kind of gravitated towards Manchester in terms of like trying to make music and, study to become, professional musicians or whatever we might eventually become. At the time, it's difficult to know those things, but I think one thing that was a common thread was that we'd all wanted to be in bands when we were younger. And we just wanted to kind of create a band, but we had the instruments that we had. I played piano, Nick played bass, and we had Rob originally on drums. We've got Jon on drums. It's those instruments that we wanted to kind of use. So when we first met each other, it was, just trying to put bands together that were using those ideas and then incorporating all of our influences. And I think that was the overlapping idea. We wanted to make sure that we could each bring our individual voices and make something different out of it. And yeah, I mean, like in terms of like it being called jazz and things like that, it's not something that ever bothers us particularly, but we agree, it's not something that we feel describes the music particularly well. Like I think there's a lot more to it, and these labels, they're very difficult to just be able to put one name, one word, one kind of very short description on any band these days. I think there are so many bands that are doing things that are very eclectic and incorporating different ideas and that are becoming very original. And I think that's what we wanted to do from the start. Jazz was there as an influence, but I think even more so than jazz, there was a lot of electronic influence and a lot of rock and things like that. It just happened to be the piano, bass, and drums were the instruments, and they're quite a jazz sort of setup. It's a very traditional kind of setup within that kind of world.
Yeah. So I'm curious to hear from each of you. Like, what did you grow up listening to when you were starting bands when you were younger? Like, you couldn't have possibly imagined that you were going to be doing what you're doing now. So, like, what was the thing? Did you want to grow up and be a rock star? Like, what was the original vibe?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I personally started playing when I was late compared to these guys. I was 13, got a bass guitar, and it was because of a lot of the Manchester bands, indie scene. I had an older brother who influenced me a lot, and he, I just like a little brother got into everything that he was into, and it was all the classic things like Joy Division, New Order, The Smiths, Stone Roses. So that sort of set me on my path. I didn't really know much about jazz. My mum had a couple of jazz records, but a lot of it was the Beatles that I grew up listening to. So very much from that world. It's quite strange, really, where I've sort of ended up in a way. But I think it was just a curiosity about music. I became obsessed with playing the bass guitar, kept studying, just kept practicing, and got a teacher who played jazz, and I think just the way he talked about the music and sort of the art form of it was really intriguing to me. And you just keep going down different rabbit holes, and like I was never, I didn't grow up like some people listening to Duke Ellington and all that sort of stuff. It all sort of came later for me. So I was just interested in music. It's just like wherever the interest takes me. But I think the crossover thing was always more my thing. I really got into like the trip hop scene and the use of the double bass in like drum and bass in like the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, and that sort of set me on a bit of a path that's really influenced the way I play, I think.
And yeah, you, Chris and Jon?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, similar to Nick, I grew up with not particularly jazzy household, but my family were all crew in the sort of Manchester rock scene of the 70s and 80s. So grew up around a lot of musicians. Discovered I liked the drums very young. So played from the age of about 2, got a kit about the age of 7. Was into a load of different rock music, a load of different... my stepdad, who was a big influence, he was the front house engineer for New Model Army, and used to take me to see them, watch Rob, their drummer, play. But then he'd be listening to like John Martin at home and things like that. And then I was a 90s rock teenager, so classic sort of 90s grunge scene, that sort of stuff. And then through that, I think moved into as electronic music started to come more into play in the sort of alternative music scene, that really took over. And the jazz thing came kind of through that, actually, like through investigating the samples that people were using, and also just the drums as an instrument. That's the history of it is in jazz, but that was definitely a later thing. So yeah, it was always quite a broad range of influences, and I ended up eventually studying more formally, but that was in my 20s, and I'd been in Leeds studying. I actually met Nick there quite a way before GoGo existed. We did some little jazz gigs together.
Yeah, sick. Yeah, Chris, yourself?
There was no kind of musical background in my family. They enjoyed listening to music, particularly my mom. She got me into a lot of stuff quite early on, like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and a lot of that kind of old sort of rock stuff. But weirdly, there was this electric organ in the house when I was growing up as a kid. Nobody played it. It was just like a random bit of furniture that somehow kept between houses.
Yeah, we had one of them as well.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of families did at that time.
Collecting dust, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But I used to apparently, like, just as a kid, like, I had this weird attraction to it and just kept going and playing it. And when I was 8, my mom and dad were like, look, he seems to be kind of enjoying this. Let's get him some piano lessons. Pretty quickly, like, I went to see a concert when I was really young. I don't really have a particular memory of this, but it's something that my mom said, where she said apparently I kicked my shoes off and was like watching this guy play and was like, that's what I want to do when I'm older, and like just had this immediate feeling of like that really connected with me. But then for years, right until kind of early 20s, I was thinking I wanted to be a classical pianist. I went to RNCM in Manchester and it was with that intention of studying to try and become a classical musician. But it was strange because like when I started bands when I was like 10 or 11, something like that was my first band. And it was just with mates at school. And it was kind of grunge, like orientated really. But, we started trying to branch out. We were doing like 9 Inch Nails covers and things like that, or trying to. But I was playing bass guitar in that because, trying to fit a piano into that kind of music, nobody wanted that. So, but yeah, as I got kind of older, I still had that feeling of wanting to be in a band. But I'd obviously been just working at the piano. That was my main thing.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where the idea of trying to make a trio came from. I'd had trios before that, but it was very much in more of a kind of jazz rooted or blues rooted sort of music. But I never felt comfortable doing that. It was just that seemed like the sort of music that was kind of appropriate for that setup. But then I heard about a band called EST, Esbjørn Svensson Trio, and as much as they were like quite heavily still rooted in the jazz world, they were kind of showing something different, something new in a lot of ways. And they were the big inspiration quite early on that made me think, yeah, you can use this setup, but you can do whatever you want with it. You don't have to kind of still be in this world. And it was really liberating then because, like I say, I never felt comfortable in the jazz world at all. Never felt like a kind of music that I played very well, but also like a music that I just didn't really enjoy playing at the same time. And I'd enjoyed listening to quite a lot of it, but never felt comfortable playing it. So I still play some classical, but just for fun. And, it was, this strange branching point where it was like, well, the classical music, it had served me a lot of good things, it gave me a lot of foundation and technique. But it just meant, it gave me that opportunity then to kind of think, what do I actually want to do? And luckily I met the right people and we were able to put a band together and do something kind of interesting.
Sort of like, are you familiar with Tim Minchin?
Yeah.
Sort of like your journey sounds a bit like the sort of rock and roll nerd is like wants to play guitar but just plays piano and then eventually finds a way of using it. That's great. So how did you all eventually sort of meet up? Like what was it, just sort of a happenstance? What was the situation to chat about putting these things together and trying them in a new way? What was that like?
Well, the band's taken a few different sort of forms over the years, hasn't it? But I mean, we met on the Manchester music scene, or at least me and Chris did. As John mentioned before, I'd met him like doing some gigs in Leeds many years ago. But yeah, we just met on the scene like you do. You get to know all the musicians, you kind of find the like-minded ones, and then eventually think, you usually playing on somebody else's project, and then it's like, oh, do you fancy getting together and trying something? And there's different incarnations of that until you get the right setup. I think the hardest thing with a lot of bands, a lot of projects, is just trying to find people who've got obviously similar taste to you, but like similar levels of motivation to do something as well. That's the hardest battle. I think any musician, they'll tell you they've been in bands with people and it's hard to get them motivated or to get them to come to a rehearsal and stuff. And then that's sort of like half the battle, isn't it? Actually,
absolutely
caring enough to commit to something. So.
I mean, all of it takes like so much work when it's treating it like a band rather than with no disrespect meant to it. There's a huge amount of skill in being able to just get people together and just play together. But to get the level of sort of detail and finesse that we're trying to aim for with the kind of complexity of the music as well, it takes so much time. And it's, as Nick says, you need to be in that same headspace if you're ready to be able to keep chipping away every single day. And I mean, we've had projects along the way where, like, there's one that I remember particularly where we did a score for a silent film. We did our own score for Kleines Katze. And, we'd be rehearsing all day, trying these things out, trying to work with the film and, sitting with it on a TV screen in our little studio, trying to like work with it. And then as soon as the day was done, it was like, right, well, there's still X number of minutes that we haven't got anything for. Going home and just, being at home still working on it. It was 12, 13, 14 hours a day just chipping away at this thing. So, I think it was really important, as Nick says, that you find people that have got that same work ethic and that are really up for it as well.
definitely.
Yes, that scary thing when you're like sort of trying to write a song with someone and then they mention some band. They're like, what do you think about whatever, modern pop band? And you're like, oh God. And you start to have doubts in your mind. You're like, this isn't going to work. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember thinking when I was first studying music of being at college and there being a lot of people there who weren't interested in getting together to play music outside of classes. And I'm thinking, why are we here? I'm here. I knew then I was here because I want to do this, and so the opportunity I could get to get together and try things out and in our own time, and not stuff that was just going to get you credits for your degree. And it was a strange experience realizing that not everyone has that same drive to make it happen.
Yeah, different people have different interests, I guess, and it must be nice when you sort of like, I guess, when you all finally linked up and you're like, oh my God, we've got the same work drive. We're going to sit for what you said, like 12 hours and just bash this out and nothing might come of it, but we're just going to keep working at it because this is our passion and this is what we love to do. I'm wondering, what was it like? Because again, it's such an interesting sound that you guys have. I feel like with every band that becomes popular, they become popular eventually. But sort of when you start off, especially like you're all from Manchester?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, so starting off in Manchester with that sound, and you're coming from what, Led Zeppelin and New Model Army and all these like punk bands. Did you do like the first gig where you started to figure out what your sound was and everyone's just sat there like, what the fuck is this? Like, was there any moment that was like that? Or was there like a sort of era that was like that where even you guys were like, what are we doing?
I can comment on this because as I alluded to before, there's been different incarnations of GoGo Penguin. The very early first one, I wasn't the bass player, but I knew I'd been in bands with Chris and Rob, the drummer at the time, and I really liked what they were doing. Like, the first version of GoGo Penguin, I was like, yeah, I get this, and so I was up for coming along and seeing the gigs and stuff. But you could see there was a few people who were, say, bit more jazz orientated, but didn't really get it. It was still a little bit divided, not massively, but like, a lot of people, it was just like, because it is a bit different. And I was like, I'm well into this. I'm all on board. But only Chris can say from actually doing it at the beginning. Yeah.
I mean, right at the very beginning, I remember our first gig was at a little bar called Sandbar that still exists. It's like not far from the music college and the uni down Oxford. And a friend of ours was putting on nights there, and tiny little room. I don't know how many people it felt amazing because it was so many people crammed in there, but they were all our mates. You know what I mean? It was all
your parents.
Well, not quite yet. This was even before that. Yeah, they had no idea what we were up to. But it was it was mostly just mates and people from college, but they hadn't heard anything we'd done until that moment. And it was great, like there was definitely a buzz about it, and it was just really fun. I mean, we were incredibly young back then compared to where we're at now. This was like really, really early days. But I remember even then, we'd write our own stuff, but we were doing kind of reworks and covers and remixes and stuff of like Ronnie Size and Massive Attack and things like that, and trying to incorporate some of these things in there to kind of really be like, that's what we're trying to do. But when we started trying to branch out, I kind of quickly found, when I was still kind of like trying to hustle gigs for us, it was very much like you're looking at jazz venues or you're looking at small jazz festivals back then. Those were the places. It wasn't like we could just go like now. We've just done this EU tour. We were playing places like Progressia in Warsaw that's like typically metal and rock, and like it's a big room. Or concert halls, where usually it might be more orchestral or classical work. We couldn't go and just say, oh, we'll go and play in those venues. It was totally inappropriate. We'd have got laughed at if we were trying to go and play, anything bigger than just small little kind of bars and clubs and stuff. So the jazz kind of circuit was perfect for that, because there's a lot of places that had that available and a lot of interest in it. And obviously approaching it with a piano, bass and drums trio, it didn't seem too alien. But then we would turn up sometimes and we'd be getting strange reactions, because you'd have your kind of proud that we're used to, something a lot tamer and a lot more traditional, and then turn up and try and do all these covers of Massive Attack and whatever, and our own stuff that was a bit mental, and it didn't always go down great, but there was always interest in it. And that's the thing. And I think if you're going to do anything different, it's always going to be divisive. And I have a problem with that. Like, over the years, I've thought about it with so many things where, there's music I love, or not just music, but any kind of art. There's art that I love, there's books that I love, there's TV, food, film, whatever it might be. And somebody else could hate all of those things.
Yeah.
It's just personal opinion. But early on, that's a tough thing to deal with, especially when you're really trying to do something that you want to be confident about, that nobody else, it doesn't feel like anybody else at the time is doing that thing. And you've got to put your faith in it and keep going. And luckily, it's paid off, but it's a tough thing to deal with at the time. Yeah.
How did that like practically play out? Because you could argue that like your music is, it's too intense for, say, jazz venues, but it's too calm for heavy metal venues. So what was that like? Was there like doubts, and how did you go about sort of forging your own path through that?
I don't think there was doubts, but I think, well, I mean, obviously there's always a little bit of self-doubt at the beginning of something, but I think it was overridden by a passion to do this.
And having fun.
Yeah, and having fun as well. But the whole thing could have easily backfired. Like somebody once asked us, well, actually quite recently in an interview, as if it was very calculated. It's like, oh, did you get a bit of this and this because you thought it'd be popular? Which would be the most insane way to approach make music. I think everyone would see through the lack of integrity of that, like
if we were trying to make it popular, we could have picked better
choices. Exactly. I think the people can smell the lack of authenticity when you're trying to do something like that. It's almost like paint by numbers sort of thing. But it could have backfired easily because it's not quite jazz, it's not quite anything. It's a little bit of all of these things, and hopefully what makes it appeal to people is the emotional content and the fact that it is authentic. We're not trying to be anyone other than ourselves, the collection of who we are. That's kind of like the basis of the new album. I mean, it always has been, but really to be like, this is who we are, and that whether you like it or not, this is what we're going to say. So
So then, sorry, go ahead.
You just reminded me of I can sort of comment on this from the outside, because before I joined the band, I remember being out on the road with another band at a festival. I think it was in Maastricht, and GoGo were playing before us, and I ran into them briefly. I think I said hello to Nick because I knew Nick. Sat next to Chris on a couch, but we didn't exchange a word because we never met. But I watched the gig, and I remember being struck by, because it was a jazz festival, and there was a lot of like very jazz projects there, and a lot of like long-standing things, and then also those kind of thrown together promoter bands with stars in with all.
I live in London. I see them all the time.
And I watched the GoGo gig. I was like, wow, this feels like a band. This has got a very clear identity, and they look like they mean what they're doing, and they sound like they mean what they're doing. And I think you had Lewis on lights there, so there was a visual aesthetic, there was a sonic aesthetic, and it just felt way more complete and thought through as a package than most of the things you see at those festivals.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it feels very clean. It's like, again, I was looking you guys up on Spotify, and it always does that thing where it compares you to other musicians, and obviously it'll say something like, there's a John Hopkins thing or an Aphex Twin comparison, and it's still like when you hear a GoGo Penguin song, it's a GoGo Penguin song. You're talking about like different influences, and how do you like practically sit down, and do you bring like a song you've heard recently and you're like, oh, I like a little bit of this, or try a little bit of that? Like how does that work in the room?
I don't think it's ever really like that when it comes to writing. I mean, maybe occasionally as we're developing something, we might have something that's useful as a reference to give the other guys a bit of an idea of what it is that we're thinking to try and go for. But it's not so often. We'll always share ideas between each other. We're always kind of passing tunes around or like other ideas, discussing stuff as we write. But in terms of the tracks coming together, it's much more just a thing of, well, on this latest record, it's been a real mixture. It's always been a mixture throughout the history of the band, but I think the latest record's a perfect kind of balance between like tracks that are just jamming in the studio, seeing what ideas come together, and then letting those develop and working on them, or somebody bringing like a small idea, maybe a bit of a beat or a bass line or a melody or a few chords or something like that then gets developed. And then sometimes it's kind of a bit more quickly fully formed, and then we develop it together. But it's always a case of like these things are very rough. It's like, you know, having a big chunk of marble, and you have to go through the stages of gradually taking bits of it away until you get the form of it, and then you get all the details, and you have to go in, you know, like really, really fine, getting everything precise. But the overall process usually takes a long time. But there were a couple of tracks on this record that really kind of came together quite quickly. And I think this is maybe just a sign of like where we're getting to in terms of musicians, individuals, but also how we work together as a band. I mean, me and Nick now have been working together for a very, very long time. So you start to learn a kind of language of communication in those situations where a lot of it doesn't even need to particularly be verbalized. You can kind of be working on something and just, you can sort of sense where you're at together with that idea. And I guess that just comes with years and years and years of sitting in the same room for days on end, practicing and trying to write together. And I think
we're like a very strange musical married couple now. It's really odd. Yeah. I mean, and outside of music, because we have to spend so much time together, you know, I pretty much can always guess what he's going to order on a menu. And you know, it's just like, we see each other. We see our wives. I think that's quite often the case. Like, but I think, you know, we're finding with Jon as well, like, you know, it was obviously these things are tricky when you immediately jump into it with somebody new that's like joining something that's been around for a while. But, you know, Jon fit in really quickly. You know, it became apparent that there was like a similar, like we said right at the beginning, you know, similar mindset, similar approach, where it's not just a single track, it's all these different threads trying to do these things on the kit, the way that we're doing it on the bass and the piano. So I think it's you know, it's a tricky one to be able to just say, oh well, we make a track like this. There are moments where when I'm writing, if I'm sketching ideas, I have no idea where it's kind of coming from really. Obviously it must be, you know, it's everything, isn't it? It's like your current experiences, music you've been listening to, but there's going to be stuff that's from years ago that's just subconsciously hidden away in there. There's sometimes, you know, there'll be ideas that have been around for a few years and we keep digging them out and trying them out and seeing if they work still, but more often than not they don't, and they get put back in the sort of reserves. But it's just a case of, I mean, one thing that I always do is just get the idea out of my head. I learned that a long while ago, that it felt like the best way to do things was, if there's an idea there, whether it's writing it down on a bit of manuscript paper or doing a really, really terrible beatbox on my phone, if it's a beat or whatever it might be, it's got to get that idea out, and then you can develop it from there. If you're trying to keep it in there and thinking you can work on it in your head, I don't feel like that's particularly helpful. There's too many things going on. So it's just always a case of that. As soon as an idea comes, get it written down or recorded or sketched or whatever, and then we just bring all of that stuff to the table. We get in the studio, we listen through everything, kind of trust our instincts that if we listen to something and we get a vibe from it, we keep it. You know, we have a board. We'll write the, you know, working titles. We'll come up with working titles for the ideas, just so we can refer to them with each other. And as long as there's a feeling there, we keep it there right until the very end. I mean, there were some things that we had right really close to the final recording session where we were like, we'll just keep it on there just in case. We'll keep it. It wasn't developing. It wasn't really going anywhere, but we still kept it there just in case, because there was still that thing that we could feel from it. And sometimes it magically just finds its way. Other times it doesn't. But just got to keep chipping away at it, I guess.
Yeah. Do you sort of get, like, you sort of mentioned it there a little bit, do you get like drops of inspiration that you just have no idea where they come from? Do you ever listen back to something you've done and you're like, no fucking idea? There's this idea of like dream elves. It's like when you go to sleep and the elves plant dreams and ideas in your head, especially for artists. Is that what it feels like, or are there some where it's like it feels very practical and you're like trying to bash it out? Is it different every time?
Well, I quote this a lot, and I think I heard Johnny Marr saying it, but it's a Pablo Picasso quote, which is, inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. And I think there's different types. There is that where something falls out the sky and you just get it, but sometimes you're just going in like a 9 to 5 or 10 till 6 in our case, and trying, like just slogging away at something. And you just don't know why. You've got a little kernel of something good, but you just can't turn it into, you don't know what the next piece is. And you keep trying for the life of you, banging your head against the wall. And then one day it's just like, let's go back to that. And then it just comes. And it's like, it's the fact that you've been showing up every day and doing it. And there's different ways. There's very different approaches. And it's good the way we've been working more recently on the last couple of albums and with Jon and stuff, with it being more collaborative, there are these moments that just come out of nowhere together. And that's really cool. Because, it's just nice to do that, isn't it? Like thinking about what we are, the initial vibe for that. And
exactly.
Just little things that come together. So, there's no rhyme or reason to it other than you need to keep showing up, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. In your little married throuple, is there ever a moment where one of you brings an idea and you're just like, this is fucking horrible. This is not it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. And, sometimes I've done it where I've like, this is great. No, I'm gonna go with this. And then after a bit, you're like, this isn't great. I can see by Chris's face, this isn't great. And I'm starting to realise it's not.
You're like, this is shit, isn't it? And you're like, yeah, thank God. You finally realised it's shit. Yes, we can move on.
Do you think less of me? So,
I think over the years we've learned though, like the best thing to do is to try it. Like, so if these ideas get brought or discussed or suggested, you have to try it before you know for sure. Because like, even if it isn't the right idea, it could lead to the right idea. So it's always that thing of like trying to just be carefully sort of critical, thinking about like why and not just dismissing it. It's like understand why, because then it might lead you to a better answer or to something that feels useful in some way.
Yeah, it's something people talk about. I talk about with my partner. We're both actors, and it's that really important thing of, as you're coming up the ladder of whatever artistic industry you're in, you need to have people that can tell you when something is shit. You need to sort of like stay humble and get back to your roots. And the fact that you guys have worked together for so long, I imagine it's the thing where like you're having a lot of ideas at the same time and you go, oh my God, that'd be really sick. We should try that. Which is just really nice. It's the nice thing that you guys don't really have a front man just by the nature of your music. So you're all sort of like equally balanced. You're not going to have someone who breaks away and starts doing a solo act. And it's really nice. Yeah. So you talked a little bit before about your new album and how it's sort of the best representation of who you are now. I'm curious, how do you practically come to that realization?
Well, the theme of the album really, we generally have a sort of a loose theme, and we've said this a lot in interviews, but like when you write an album, it becomes a snapshot of who you are at that moment in your lives and as a band. It has to. It's just who you are at that point. And when we were writing the album, there was a bit of inspiration from a book I was reading. It's called The Middle Passage. It's actually about like becoming middle-aged, or getting old. And sort of looking back on certain values in life that maybe you've never really reflected on before because you're just getting on with it and being younger and that sort of thing. And then it's about like getting to a point of being like, well, who's the authentic person? What do I want to keep and what's not useful anymore? And I thought that translated pretty well to the musical sense of the band as well. I discussed it with these guys and it inspired a lot of the titles. It's instrumental music at the end of the day, so it's quite difficult to convey these things. And we do also quite like people to bring their own meanings to a lot of the music. But for us, it felt like being confident and strong with some of the decisions that we made musically, being a bit more brave. There's often an element of like, well, are we allowed to do that? Because there's certain preconceptions of who we are as a band and what we're supposed to do. You know, like a lot of people think, well, it's a piano trio and what they're doing with synths or doing something a bit more dancey. And this time it was just like, well, fuck it, this is what we want to do. So,
I think with some of those things, like we were trying to do them from the beginning in a weird way, but we just used the instruments that we had to do it. So like there's, you know, so we ended up getting called acoustic electronica at one point by some. It was like kind of a clever idea, and it sort of makes sense in some ways, but it did make sense in terms of what we were trying to do quite early on, which was a lot of emulating electronic ideas or electronic techniques or electronic sounds, but with the acoustic instruments. But even back then, we had some effects on there, and we did some tracks like Shock and Awe was one really early on where it was quite experimental. I mean, we had a metronome ticking away in the background and like effects on the bass and on the piano, and it's like you know, things that we've wanted to do from the beginning. But I think we've sort of tempered them to a greater degree early on, and then we're just getting to the point now where it's like it feels like it's been a very natural progression for us to go to these places with synths or electronics, or expanding the amount of effects we might use live as well, from front of house and from pedal boards that we use as well. It's it doesn't feel like it's a big departure, but I guess for some people, especially when the band often gets called jazz, you know, like as soon as you get that kind of label on it, for some people it's going to be like a big leap away from what their ideas are of what they think. But this is, as Nick said, that was one of the things that we were trying to think about much more with this album. We've done it to an extent in the past, but rather than worrying about other people's expectations, we were thinking about what our expectations were, what we wanted to do and what we were trying to say, rather than, you know, thinking what's the outside view going to be of that. You know, we were just like, well, let's present it. Let's give these people something to think about. And like we said right near the beginning, you know, it's going to be divisive no matter what we do. You know, if we made a really, you know, typical jazz album with a load of standards on it, there's going to be a load of people that are like, what the hell are GoGo Penguin doing? You know what I mean? But there's going to be some people that are like, oh, finally. You know? So it's like, whatever we do at any point, it's going to be divisive. But that's cool. I'm up for that.
And everyone's angry on the internet now, you know, about everything, aren't they? So, like, you know, just don't go to the comments if you can help it.
Yeah, I imagine you do get some people. I mean, you can't please everyone, can you? Some people are going to be like, oh, they're not the same as they used to be. And other people are going to be like, oh my God, this is so much better. This is the next chapter. Like, you're always going to get that. Like exactly. You say, don't read the comments. Yeah. So when you guys are writing a song, do you have a, like, as you were talking about sort of like reaching middle age for one of the tracks, do you have like an idea or a story that you're trying to get across in each one of them? Or is it improv? Like, how does it? Yeah.
Sometimes there's a story. I think it was a bit more prevalent on the previous album because it was such a difficult time for a lot of reasons, and couldn't help but some of that sort of leak into the album a little bit. Because as I said, you know, it's a bit like who we are at that point. But there's often a story behind things or a meaning, but we don't always want to be too explicit about it because, you know, I do this with songs. Sometimes you don't know what they're about, but you make it yours. And want people to do that, you know. So we don't want it to be too prescribed and go, well, it's exactly about this, and you should listen in this way. Particularly without lyrics, you know. There is a track on this album with Dowdy Matsiko called "Forgive the Damages," and obviously it's way easier to interpret that because there's lyrics and words to it. But we do like to have those meanings in, but sometimes keep them a bit more personal.
Yeah. Do you know the track "Year of the Cat" by Al Stewart?
No, I don't.
No. I'll give it a listen afterwards. It's great. I'm assuming that the history in my brain that I'm about to say goes with this track. It might be a different one, but it's a sort of he was in a piano bar one night and he heard this pianist playing this sort of quite haunting melody, and he's like, where did you get that? And he's like, oh, I made it myself. And so he sort of nicked it and put it into the opening of this song, and it's this sort of mysterious song about a woman he's in love with, and it's one of those where you don't quite understand the lyrics but you just love it. It's such a banger. And he was talking about it on the radio, and they're like, what does it mean? And he's like, well, I was dating this girl at the time and she was really into cats, and that was it. And it's like, oh, so you can sort of wreck people's idea of what this thing is, and you got all these sort of different meanings behind it. Do you get like people coming up to you after shows and they're like, oh my God, it's about my relationship with my grandfather? And you're like, yes, it's 100% about your relationship with your grandfather. Is that a thing that you get like often?
But that's beautiful. That's the biggest compliment, you know. And we've had it all, really, you know, like, because it's instrumental music. You know, we've had the same track. People saying we had it as we walked down the aisle at the wedding. Other people saying we had it at, you know, our son's funeral and stuff, like, you know, like quite very emotional stuff and everything in between. But it's great that those meanings are, you know, imprinted on it. That's. Because they're feeling the emotional quality. It doesn't have to be, right, it's about this. It's like they bring their own meaning. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, okay. So what was it like then to like, how exactly did you say explode out of Manchester? Was it an explosion or was it a gradual thing? Was it sort of a UK, started to learn more about it and then straight to Uzbekistan? Or like, what was that like?
Yeah, we were like, one day we're going to be in Uzbekistan.
Aim high.
Experience the Wi-Fi in a hotel. No, I think that nobody will, like, even overnight sensations, you know, that usually take some years to get there. I think we've had our phases of sharing a Travelodge family room and wishing that we could graduate to Premier Inn, you know. Maybe one day we'll all get our own hotel rooms. You know, it's it's even like it. To the outsider, it might have looked like it kind of blew up quite quickly, which in a way it did. It still took its time.
We had a couple of really good boosts, like things like the Mercury Prize. We had a lot of support from Giles Peterson and a few other people around that time, Jamie Cullum and some other people that were giving us a lot of really great support on radio and things. But I think it's been very gradual, but for us it's just been really enjoyable because of that. Like, you know, we've really had to be massively involved right from the beginning in building it. Everything's required work and effort, but then you get these little rewards from it. And as much as, I mean, you know, it sounds like we're joking about that, but it was the truth. Like when we were the three of us sharing a Travelodge family room and thinking about the Premier Inn, we'll have a room each. When we did get that, as small as a victory as it is, we'd worked for it, we'd earned it. You know, we knew that these little things that we were doing each day and working towards these things were building. And that's continued. You know, it's just been this nice kind of gradual build. And we've seen that, you know, with the kind of venues that we play out, with the crowds that we're playing to. And it's still happening now, you know, like the fact that we're over here, we're in Tashkent, we've been invited here to play for a festival. I would have never thought, you know, if you'd have asked like 10 years ago, would we be playing somewhere like this? Wouldn't have ever imagined it. And the same, like, you know, we played Fuji Rock. We managed to play there not so long ago, and we're going back again this year. And I was looking at the bill this year, and we're on the same day as as Massive Attack headlining. And they've been like my favourite band since I was a kid. You see those sort of things, recognising, you know, these things that we've gradually worked and that we get to experience. It's really rewarding. It's really beautiful to be in that position where it feels like there's this, you know, it's still steps leading up, you know, just gradually leading to new places and new things. And so, yeah, I mean, there was, you know, there were some kind of big pushers initially, like around V2.0. It was around that album. That was the one that kind of felt like a big lift. And then after that record, we ended up going and signing with Blue Note Records for a while. And again, that was, you know, that felt like a big moment for us as a band. And it opened up a lot more audiences in Japan and America particularly. So that was really exciting because, you know, we'd never thought about this stuff. You know, we were just keeping our heads down, working hard and, you know, enjoying the gigs as they came to us and that we were able to expand upon. But when these little moments happen, they just feel like that extra kick, that extra little boost. It's pretty exciting. Yeah.
Do you ever get imposter syndrome? Do you ever look back and you're like, I didn't write this. I'm just this guy on stage doing someone else's music. Do you ever get a moment like that?
I don't think so. No.
I've had my moments.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. But I think it's healthy to have those kind of things. Otherwise we'd be like just walking around going, "We're legends." I don't know. Maybe
you can still get to that point. It's on the horizon.
Yeah.
The easy hotel and the legend status is not too far away. Yeah. So then what is it like when you're doing, I don't know how long your sort of tours are, but the classic thing you hear about, I think of it from an acting perspective, right? Is like you can do a play for months on end and you get sick of saying the same lines every night. Do you ever, are you usually in it? Are you somewhere else when you're playing? Or are there nights when you're playing and you're like, okay, you're just sort of painting by numbers? Does it sort of vary?
I mean, I think there are times when, and any band will tell you this, like you're doing it night after night and you're exhausted, you've had no sleep and it's been a difficult sound check or something's gone wrong. And there are moments when it's tough, without doubt. But I think you do have to have a certain level of care and professionalism to put that aside once you step on stage. And sometimes it's more of a slog than others. Sometimes you're just in that zone. The dream is always to be in that zone, where you're absolutely cut off from everything. But the reality is that we have lives and some things leak into
I think that
scenarios.
Previous tour to this one's a good example, isn't it? Like on the we did an EU run, mostly like France, bit of Spain, one in Switzerland and one in Italy. And three of us got very, very ill. Me, Nick and Dowdy, we all got really ill in the middle of the tour. And it was tough, it was where we were questioning whether we'd have to cancel shows and stuff because we were that bad. And we managed it, you just get up on stage and you do it. But the thing is, we've all got each other's backs and we're all there in it together. And weirdly, it was kind of, it was helpful to have something that we really love and that we really enjoy doing, that you can really focus on and kind of lock into to help distract you from the fact that you've got, all this other stuff going on. The difficulty was when you get back on the bus and you're just thinking it's just, am I gonna get through to the morning? It's like that kind of, but the actual gigs themselves, it was great. And we've had similar stuff, when we have to travel, we'll go to, we were really lucky we got to go to New Zealand and Australia. We've only done it the once so far, but this was a few years back. And the jet lag, getting there and basically being straight in pretty much.
How long's the flight?
Oh, I don't even remember.
30-something hours?
Yeah, it's crazy.
2 hours, I think.
We were actually talking yesterday about the gig that we did in Sydney, because Lee, our sound engineer, he does monitors he does front of house and monitors, but he was on monitors, I think. And he was saying, I actually don't know how you played that gig in Sydney, because he was falling asleep at the monitor desk, trying to stay awake whilst we were doing it.
That was one where we'd done the big trip, so we had a bit of initial jet lag recovery in Wellington, but then we played the show in Wellington, and then I think we went back to the hotel, slept for about 2 hours, and then got up and did a flight to Sydney, and then straight to sound check show.
Yeah,
just the rest.
Yeah,
it's difficult. But then the thing is, once you get lots of people in a room all together, it becomes a sense of occasion. It isn't just us playing to people; it's about everyone in the room. And that you kind of feed off that, especially if it's an audience that's really up for it. It gives you that boost that you need for an hour and a half before you collapse afterwards.
Yeah. Do you ever get you hear all this stuff about the music industry and producers coming in and being like, oh, you should do this? So you get obviously it's not the case with you guys, but you get lyric writers, which are quite popular now for big musicians. Do you ever get people trying to tell you what you should do?
We never listen to anyone.
Yeah.
No.
Blinkers on, shut the studio door, that's it. Yeah. No, we're quite lucky that we've, since V2.0, we've been working with the same two producers. Joe Reiser, who's our front of house engineer as well. He's been with us since the beginning. And then Brendan Williams, who he's worked in a studio, a few places in Manchester, but he's got a studio called Log 4, and he's always collaborated with Joe and with us working together on the records. And it's great because we've built that working relationship the same as we have within the band, where when it gets to that point that we're doing the recordings, we've got all the music ready, but they'll have come along and listened, and they'll be listening to the demos that we send them. We're all kind of in the same place, but they'll chip in with ideas that we just wouldn't think of that might be really helpful, especially like in the production stage of things. But especially in that stage in the recording process where we're thinking about that final polish, that final little set of additions that we might use to just really refine what we've built in the studio. And more often than not, these are things that we just wouldn't come up with because they're thinking from a different perspective. They're thinking from that studio engineering side of things that we just really don't have that same experience in. But it's great because, we can also discuss things very openly and very comfortably because we've just worked together and been really close friends for that long. It feels like there's still people that we're really keen on working with down the line. I don't think that there's any particular urge to change that. And then we've been really lucky with the labels as well. They've been really supportive. They've never really kind of involved themselves in saying we think you should do this or do that or do the other. They're just kind of quite happy to be confident in us doing what we do and saying go do your thing. That's the experience so far for sure. Yeah,
I do know what you mean though. Like the sort of maybe a mistake that I see some bands do is they get a bit of success on like the first or second album, and then they're like, right, we're going to go to LA and work with this producer who cost X amount of money, and thinking that it's somehow, I mean, in some cases maybe it works out, but in a lot of cases it's just like, oh, we want to do this because it sounds like the right thing to do rather than what might be best for the music.
I've definitely seen in the past, the projects I've experienced that where they've brought in a sort of name producer and they've come in with their ego and their attitude about what they think the music should be, but without really a deep understanding of where the music comes from, and it doesn't really work out.
So then, like, when you say complete an album, are you sort of like, are you always writing the next thing as well? Like when you're on tour, are you getting more ideas, or do you ever like get to the end and you're like, what are we going to do next?
No, I mean, I think the cycle always seems to have been like make an album and then go on tour. It's like it's very hard to do the two simultaneously because both just require so much energy and so much effort. And, we're gradually trying to get to a point as well where somewhere in and amongst that, we have some normal real life with family and things like that. That kind of time in there. But to be honest, I think at the moment, I can't speak for the other guys, but personally, I feel like having that time at home that we dedicate to writing and saying, right, this period, we're just going to be getting in the studio loads. As Nick said earlier, when you keep working and you keep chipping away, that's where the inspiration comes from. I think trying to do that on tour, there's days where it's hard even just to, motivate in the sort of downtime to like read a book or whatever, just because your brain's so tired. So the thought of like trying to really put the effort in and work on these things, it's a challenge. And the setup, personally, I still really like writing at the piano. I do sketch a lot of things using like, drum machine or synths or sitting with a DAW and just sketching ideas. But more often than not, the ideas have still stemmed from just playing around on the piano. It's where I feel most comfortable. Even if it's like a beat, quite often it comes from the piano because it's just a rhythmic idea that I'll be playing around with, and that'll kind of trigger something that makes me think of a beat or something. So without having that on tour, that's tricky as well. Just having that familiar setup.
And sometimes like seeds of ideas that come, or seeds of like how to approach something. We'll just have a chat. I think we had one the other day in Soundcheck where we were just talking about an approach we wanted to try when we finally get round to the writing process. Some kind of processing that we want to experiment with to see what that results in. So there's but before this record, we talked a bit about we want to make a darker, dancier record, and those little seeds of ideas, even if it's not anything concrete, the meat of the writing process. I think sometimes it's important to have those initial bits as well.
So you don't have like a like a method that you try to recreate every time? You don't have like a process. It's like one of you might come in with something. Is it different every single time, or do you have something that you go away and do? Like Chris, you going away and just like bashing something out on the keys in your own spare time. Like, how does that sort of play out?
It's a mixture, isn't it? I mean, like I think.
I mean, you do that.
But, that'll be one of the techniques. But again, I mean, like we've been going for a long time as a band, but also just as people who write music. And it's exciting to still keep trying to push to find different ways of trying things, because it's just adding more tools to your kind of tool set when you're wanting to be able to use things. So there's ones that I feel, like I said, I feel very familiar sitting at the piano. I know for a fact that like I could sit at a piano and I can come up with something. It won't necessarily be the greatest thing, but there'll be ideas and I can sketch those. I can record them. I'll get them in the pot and they might become something. But it's really fun then to be doing things differently. Like it's only in the last few years I've gotten to using some modular synth setup, and some of the fun things to do with that are literally just doing something completely out there that is completely different to the piano, that removes the idea of a keyboard, that even removes the idea of like a sort of tonal harmony, and just gets rid of all these things that are familiar to me from my background as a musician or as a composer, and then just see where that leads to. One of my favorite modules I got is literally it just generates random information. You can then freeze it and capture these little moments, and it's called Marbles for anybody who's a nerd like me who wants to. It's a really popular one that's used quite a lot, but it's not I've not found it particularly practical for using with the band, but as a way of just and not even for generating pitch, but for sending it to something that it'll just create different textures or different sounds or things that are just very surprising, where unless I just happen to find those parameters on a module, this thing just chucks out a load of random information, and you might just capture something that gives you that kind of starting point for something.
Yeah, it's like you say with producers, is sometimes they give you that idea that you couldn't have possibly thought of just an outside eye. I guess with acting, it's sort of like directors do that job, but it must be nice to like have your own ideas, but then just play with something that's like, oh Christ, I didn't think of that. It's a really good idea. See how we can incorporate that. From what I understand, modular synth is one of those things that is like, it's a really difficult thing to get into at the start. But then I feel like everyone I know who's got into it, it's all they can talk about. And then you're at a party and you're like, I do this with my modular synth. And you're talking to people who are just like glazing over because you're so deep into it, they couldn't possibly understand.
Yeah, it's quite a comedy world, but I'm a nerdy guy, so it's fine.
Good to be honest.
Like we said, this album's all about knowing who we are and what we want to be, and I know I'm a nerd. It's fine.
There is a track that actually came out on an EP we just released called "Call to the Void," but this track's called Mount Analog, and it was the very first thing that we jammed in the studio before for the whole Necessary Fictions thing. It's weirdly the last track that's been released from those sessions. But it was sort of based on a thing that you'd come up with on the modular, and then we'd sort of forgotten about it, came back to it like 6, maybe longer, like 8 or 10 months afterwards, and we're like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then it took weeks to figure out how to actually get that sound again. Then you were like, I don't know how I did it.
I had no idea. I was looking through my phone to see if I'd taken pictures of the setup in that form, because like obviously wires everywhere, and you can just kept like pulling modules out, putting something different in, and then I was like, oh Jesus, I don't remember how we created this thing. And it's like, and like Nick says, it was so we felt that buzz from it. Like we'd said, we had it on the list, it was still there, and we were like, we've got to do something with that. But again, that's fun. That was another thing that was really fun. I'm kind of glad in a way that we didn't remember exactly how we'd done it, because that thing of then trying to relearn it, trying to work things out, it really built the familiarity with the setup and with the instruments and with that gear quite quickly. And again, that's just more tools. You're just adding more and more ideas that you can use down the line. And it's a really fun process. And I'm really glad that we're getting on both like individually and as a band, but to be in a position where we're still excited and still finding it fun to write and to make music, and that it's not just a paint by numbers thing and like a follow this method that we've always done. I think I mean, I'd hate that if that was the case. If I was just in the position where I was like, right, time to write another album, sit at the piano and just bang out a load of tunes. I'd hate that. I love that there's always like this feeling of, right, what can we try? What can we do? On this last one, we got a load of gear out, tried loads of different synths, instruments, effects, pedals, techniques with writing and chopping samples up and all sorts of things. But, you know, some of them just didn't feel right. Some of them just weren't the right thing to do. And it was really nice to be in that position of going, well, we don't have to use all these things. We're not limited. We're not going to struggle to make an album if these things aren't included or don't work. So yeah, it's just keeping it fun, keeping it exciting. I remember, you know, I'm terrible at remembering quotes, but you know, has talked a lot about, you know, it's the idea of play. You play an instrument, you play music, and this idea of play in the way that kids play. I've got a boy who's 6, nearly 7. Seeing him try things and letting his imagination go wild, where there's not that limitation that comes with age and with all the things, the baggage that you carry, and the, you know, I don't engage with social media or any of that, like I haven't for a while now.
It's healthy.
Well, it was purely for that. Like, it's not, you know, I'm not trying to, like, for some people it works really well. My wife loves it, and she works within that world as well, and it's great for her, but it's terrible. But, you know, being able to lose some of that and tap back into that thing of play and not worry about whether it's going to be right or wrong, whatever that right or wrong is. And just being able to enjoy it and see where that leads to. I think it's really important to be, you know, doing that at the age that we're at and the stage that we're at with the band. I'm really, you know, really pleased that we're still able to do that.
Yeah, I think that is the most important thing, just like play and enjoying that. So like, has that helped you then, like watching your son? Has that sort of like re-inspired?
Yeah.
It is so important, just play.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there are little moments. I mean, you know, it's a bit of a random one, but one that really stuck in my mind that happened during lockdown was when because we couldn't, as it was the case for everybody, you couldn't go to the parks and things like that at one point, and we'd just literally be trying to get him, you know, teaching him to walk, and we'd go outside, just outside our house and down the end of the cul-de-sac at the end. And I remember him just pointing at the ground and going, sky, and clouds. And I was like, no, mate, that's the floor. And like, you know, that's the ground. And then I look down and there's a puddle there and you can see the sky and the clouds reflected in it. And it's just those things of, you know, remembering to like be really observant and just looking at the world differently. You know, you get into these patterns and these routines and all these things that build over time, and you know, it's difficult to sometimes shake that, but he's given me quite a lot of good reminders to keep my eyes open in that kind of way, and you know, look a little bit differently when possible. Yeah,
it's a really dangerous one, I find, because especially with something like jazz, like there's a couple of jazz venues I've been to in London, and you get those sort of stuffy old people who are like, oh, jazz is the best, it's just so playful. But you do find times where it is just methodical and the play has sort of been lost, but you've got that sort of like illusion. And people, if you say that there's play, you can pretend that there's play, but it's a very different thing to actually be playful and sort of keep that childlike, enjoyable quality. Yeah,
definitely. I think being able to do that and play where it's the way that we want to do it. So again, remember, it's that thing like a kid will, you know, they'll do what they want to do because they're having fun with it, to just shake off those preconceptions or what other people might think are the ways to do it or the ways not to do it. I think it's really important to be able to just listen to your own. It's another one that I've said a few times, but it really meant a lot to me hearing a chef on Chef's Table talk about there comes a day where you've got to be your own master. You listen to yourself. And that doesn't mean switch off and ignore everybody else. It's important to listen to what other people think and to be able to be ready to take those things when it's useful. But at some point, you have to realize that you're not always looking for a teacher. You're not always looking for somebody else who apparently knows better. You've got to look at what you want to do and what you think, and take all that experience and all those ideas and try and make use of them, try and actually do something with them.
Yeah, is that something that you guys have found over time then? Because you've been together for, how long have you been together now?
Was it maybe 14 years or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I mean, we had a different, I was in the Chris Illingworth trio at one point, but that was obviously before GoGo Penguin. That was a different thing. Yeah. I think we've been doing this since 2012. End of 2012 I joined. Yeah. So a while.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's that thing whenever you go, oh God, and you sort of look away that you know it's been a while.
Exactly.
Yeah. So have you found, like, do you think that you've gotten better and you've figured out more over time what your sound is, and you talk about with this new album, like it's more about you and who you are now. Have you found that you've been able to open up to play more over time? Like now that you've got the skill, arguably more than you did before, do you feel like you can open up to play even more?
Yeah, definitely. I think we went through a little phase. Well, I say a little phase. It was probably about 3 albums worth where we were becoming a little more and more sort of anxious, like low level, but like, you know, every time it was time to write, I think way too like conscious about at the outside world, what they might think, what we think of ourselves, all that sort of stuff. And you know, it's for various factors, but I think the play element of that got lost. It was like, we have to make an album, and so we're sort of doing it dutifully. And I think now we are at a point, like with experimenting with some of these things, where it's a bit like, well, this is how we're going to approach it, and yeah, have more fun with it. It's an important part of it, definitely. I think when you do music as for your living, it's quite easy for that to be lost a little bit, you know, because the stakes are quite high, aren't they? It's not just like picking up a guitar and strumming a few chords. It's like there's people expecting you to deliver an album by a certain deadline, and it can become a bit overwhelming, but I think we've found a way to navigate that now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, what was that like initially? Because it does get to the point where I imagine you were sort of doing other jobs and making money when you started the band, and then eventually it got to the point where you were touring and you could make your full-time living, but you got, you know, families and kids. And what's that transition like? Is it quite scary to be like, okay, I have to do this now, I have to make money, and then you have to, like you say, you eventually got out of that, but what was that like initially to be like, okay, this is how I make money now?
Yeah, I think initially it was great, and then it got a bit more tricky. But we still found a way through it. But yeah, things were a bit more difficult at times. Like it's starting to get used to that role and things like the stakes being a bit higher. Yeah, I think. But yeah, we've come through it, and still the work. If you look back on it, I mean, there's certain things you can look back and go, oh, I wish I'd done that differently, or we could have done that better. But overall, I think we're pretty proud of the catalogue that we've. You know, I think it'd be weird if we didn't feel like that about some of the music. You know, if just go, this is all great. You know, like there are certain things where you just can't help but go, oh, I would have done that differently now. But you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Well, I think it's like you say now, is like the newest release is Call to the Void. That's right. Call to the Void. I imagine you look back at the other ones and you're like looking at almost like a chapter of your life. It must feel like that. It's like, this is what I was like back then. And it is that thing that people say is like, as you get better, you look back and you're like, oh, I could have done that better or slightly differently or whatever. But it's kind of nice to also look back and know that you've progressed and you've got better over time. Yeah. Aged like a fine wine.
Yeah, hopefully.
And I want to shift a little bit because I've interviewed a couple different musicians and I'm just fascinated to know your experience with this. And obviously it's a little bit different with your music because there's such a live aspect to it. But I'm wondering, as everybody everywhere on the train, whatever, is talking about AI at the moment. There's all this chat about how AI is taking over the music industry, and I'm wondering what's that like from your perspective?
Yeah, I've been asked about this a few times. It's not directly affecting us at this point, but I think, you know, it's bound to. I mean, what I like to think, I don't know, I mean, speaking personally now, what I like to think is that AI can never really, it can only copy and emulate things that already exist, and it can do that very well. But to get that fresh thing from wherever it comes from, I mean, we've talked about this, haven't we? Like, hopefully that inspiration, you don't know where, that like, hopefully people are still going to want that from humans. I mean, otherwise we're in trouble. But really,
I think in a sort of musical area like we operate, I'd be very worried if I was writing library music for you know, for soundtracks and things like that. But people are always, I share that optimism that people are always going to seek a certain kind of authenticity, and you see it across a variety of fields, whether it's like when, back when craft beer became a thing, because there was only large commercial brewers, and then people started making something interesting, and it became huge because people identified that as something that was a bit more real. And I think that it happens across all kinds of different arenas. So I'm staying optimistic in that regard. I'm also massive and know quite a bit about how these models work, and Nick's right. Yeah, it's still at this. It's capable of a lot of things, but it's still very much autocomplete on steroids. So yeah.
I think you guys are, you're definitely safe in your genre of music. I hear a lot as well about how venues can be quite horrible. You hear a lot about like Ticketmaster taking over venues, and I think what people mostly hear is that bands only tend to make money through things like merch. I'm curious what that's, because you guys have been around for a while as well, and you've sort of seen that grow with your music. I'm curious what that's like, just making money and having so many different, basically non-creative people with a lot of money trying to rinse your industry for as much as it's worth. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the problem is it kills the art form, doesn't it? Like, it's another thing that's chipping away at people's ability to make a living at something and do it for all the right reasons. And there's a lot of people who are doing it for the wrong reasons, in my opinion, which is just treating art like a commodification, like anything else. It's just capitalism. Let's make money quickly and get out of there. And I guess we're fairly lucky that we've been around a while, so we were established and people know about us. But I think about the younger generation trying to do a similar thing, and it wasn't easy for us, and I think it's going to be harder for them, or just nigh on impossible, unless you're incredibly well funded and just quite wealthy, which none of us are, unfortunately. So it's I don't know, it's a very difficult one. There's a lot of people just trying to make money. We're in late stage capitalism, and it does compromise the art, but we are also quite in a niche world still. Even though we're quite popular, it is a left field niche thing, and I think people will hopefully still appreciate the craft that we put into it. I hope so.
Definitely. At least Uzbekistan, yeah,
exactly. The people of Uzbekistan are getting.
You'll be fine.
The merge point's interesting because you're right. It's a really good way for bands to make money, but then you start getting certain venues where they're like, okay, we're going to take a huge cut of that, and then makes that less viable, and you have to take strange decisions about what you're going to sell where.
I mean, that's another thing as well, just venues saying, we're going to take a cut of your merch. I think Tim Burgess from the Charlatans has been on quite a rampage of trying to rectify a lot of this, and quite rightly so. Because a lot of bands, they only make money from the merch sales on tour. That is reality.
Cool. So I guess my sort of final question for you all is, how do you switch off? Like, are you always thinking about music, or like when you're not on tour and you're not creating, what do you do to get your head out of it? Is it spend time with family? Do you just binge television? Do you play video games for 72 hours straight? Like, how do you, because I think it's really important for artists in general to not think about their craft every now and then, as much as it is, like, as you say, and I think that's part of the reason why you've been so successful, is just bash away at it endlessly until something works and you can find something. But I think it's also important to just kind of shut your brain off. I'm curious, like, what do you guys do to just zen out?
I think for Chris, the days of long computer game sessions are over with his son.
I'll be honest with that used to be. I struggle with. I mean, I love watching some good series, but it's very rare that I find something that keeps my attention enough. Same, like, I love watching a film, but again, I feel like I want something that engages me, that I have to engage with as well and put something into to get something back from. And computer games, like, I got into a lot of kind of mostly like indie stuff because I find it more creative, but like some really good computer games, and that used to really help me wind down. It used to just be like you'd be in that zone, just somewhere else, just really engaged with that. But since having my son, I haven't got the time these days, and then you get that little bit of time when he's gone to bed, and you just kind of go, oh, it's just like everything's like, the day's finally done. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we all love reading. We all like. Trying to spend time with friends and family. Time's kind of precious these days, especially like when we're in the midst of tours like this. So getting back and just actually, being with people that you really kind of care about, that you don't always get the time to spend with, that's always just a great way of winding down, I think. And and I love cooking as well. Like, I find that really nice thing to still feel like you're being creative, but it's just completely away from music. It's just something totally different, and there's no pressure other than my wife and my son going, oh, I don't like this, which is luckily pretty rare. There's no pressure. I can just make whatever I want to make, and I can just have some fun with it, and it means that we get to have that family time together as well, which is always great.
Yeah, I think seeing friends and spending time at home, with family and stuff, it's become important at this point. I think for so many years it was always blinkers on music. Most of my friends were just musicians, and it was very like that. And like we had a month, just over a month, between the two legs of these last two European tours, and I didn't really play at all. And I saw lots of friends. I went to a friend's wedding. I caught up with loads of people, and spent time with my wife. And then I really suffered because we've come back on tour, and I play quite aggressively anyway, but I play the double bass, and I got a really big blister after 3 gigs on this run, and I'm having to put super glue on it and everything. And we were playing in Germany. We've got a fan he's a real Uber fan, but he's become a friend as well. And I was saying, I've got this big blister on my finger. And he said, well, but you told me a few years ago that you practice every day. And it's like, well, I did then, but now I'm doing other stuff. So it's come back. What about you, John? What do you do?
All kinds of things. I mean, I think anything that's time away from music is, I'd love to get out into inspiring places, or, see a bit of nature, but that's a bit, I mean, I haven't had much chance to do that lately. And this month that we had off, I've been fixing up a house, but actually doing that was another, just a bit of headspace away from thinking about
just a mindless task. Cutting wood.
It's nice. It's nice to do that.
Learning how to plaster, just stuff. It's like cutting holes in walls.
We sound really rock and roll, don't we?
But then, also just getting out and seeing friends and spending time with people. I'm a bit of a practice head. Like I really love to get a good amount of practice in every day if I can. And this is one of the first times when I was just too busy with other stuff to do that. But I actually found that when I came back, I got in my studio for a few days before this tour just to kind of get match fit. And when we got out of the tour, I found I had a slightly new sort of zest for it. A different perspective. And although I had to do a bit of work to get the physical side of playing back up to scratch, the mental side had kept going, even though I hadn't been in the forefront of my mind. I think when you do this for long enough, you're slightly solving musical problems in the back of your mind. Anyway, that kept ticking over, and when I came back, it was quite exciting actually to have had the time off and get back into it like that.
Yeah, 100%. Like chopping wood or cooking. I like cooking so much more than I like baking. My partner really likes baking, but I hate the preciseness of it. And it's like, if you've chucked in too much paprika, it's just going to be a slightly different tasting dish, and you can just sort of experiment with that. And we live on a narrowboat as well, so you're always thinking about something. You're like, I've got to plaster that bit of the corner or something. So yeah, it's really nice to sort of get away and just like freshen up a little bit. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really lovely. Hope it goes well in Uzbekistan tonight. I'm hopefully going to catch you guys when you come back to London. How much longer is your tour this time round?
Well, we've still got a couple of weeks really. We've got this gig, and then we've got a couple in Portugal, followed by a few UK dates, and then we've got a little bit of time off before we head out to like China, Japan, and other festivals, and quite a busy year really overall.
I think we're back on the 24th of May. We've got a bit of a rest then. Before it's, yeah.
Sick. All right. Good luck with it all. I'm hoping you guys get a nice premiere in at some point with your own rooms.
Yeah.
We're all in this room right now.
Yeah. The glory. Amazing. All right,
Nice.
guys. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right. Bye.